In this video, I'm going to look at adding integers. Now, for most of you, this should be a review of what you would have covered in grade 7. So I'm not going to go into super detail because hopefully you have seen this before. So I'm going to look at adding first. I've got positive 3 plus positive 2. And so if I was to think about doing this using our integer chips, which is what we would have done in grade 7, so I'd have something like I'd have my 3 positive 1s, and then I would add into that 2 positive 1s again. And so I can see that really I have my group of 3, and then I add in a group of 2, and together they just make a big group of 5. So my answer here would be positive 5. Okay, looking at the one below, negative 4 plus negative 3, so same thing. I'd start out with my 4 negatives, and then I would add in 3 negatives below, and when I add in those 3 negatives, I really just create a larger grouping of negatives. These guys all come together to form a larger grouping of negative 7. Okay, but what do we do when the signs aren't the same? Right? So with this one here, I'm going to start off with, I've got negative 3. So starting off with negative 3, so I draw in my 3 negatives, and then I'm going to add in 2 positives. So I'm going to draw in 2 positive 1s like that. So I've got my 3 blue negative integer chips, and then my 2 red positive integer chips. And now what happens is my integer chips are going to kind of cancel each other out. It's kind of like the positives and negatives, they're like enemies, right? And when they meet each other, they don't like each other. So for lack of a better term, they fight. They fight each other and they kind of kill one another off. And so this negative and that positive, they kind of cancel each other out, right? And then this negative and that positive kind of cancel each other out. And those guys are now gone. Now, in math, we refer to that as a zero pair, but it's much more fun to think of them as eliminating one another. All right, so we've got our zero pair there because our 2 negatives cancel out 2 of the positives, and what we're left with is simply that 1 negative chip all by himself. So we get negative 1 is our answer. Okay, if I was to look at the next one, so again, I got negative 4 plus positive 6. I'm going to start off with my 4 negative chips. And then, sorry, that's kind of a bad negative there. Then I've got my 6 positives. So I'm going to draw in my 6 positives. And you can see here that, again, I'm going to have an integer chip battle. And some of the positives and negatives, they're going to go away. They're going to make a zero pair. They're going to be eliminated. These guys here, 4 negatives and 4 positives, they all cancel each other out. They make what we would call a zero pair. And now I'm left with these 2 positive chips left over. Okay? So when I'm adding integers, because you probably don't want to draw forever, hopefully what you noticed was when the signs were the same, right? Back on the very first one, when the signs were the same, what happened was our integer chips just kind of combined to make a bigger grouping, right? So if you think back to the first slide we had here, my positive 3 and my positive 2 came together to just make a larger grouping of positives, and we got positive 5. It's kind of like these guys line up, and then these guys line up, and they realize, hey, we're friends, we don't need to fight. Let's just make a bigger group, right? Same thing here. I had my 4 negatives and my 3 negatives, and they kind of lined up against one another, and they went, hey, we're the same, let's be friends. Okay? So when you have the same sign and you're adding together, you just get a larger grouping of that same type of integer. So when you have the same signs, your sign is going to stay the same. So that's different than when we're multiplying and dividing. When we have the same signs, we keep that same sign. We just make a larger grouping of that type of integer. On our second slide, we had different signs. And so really what we're doing when we've got different signs, if we don't want to draw it out every time, we're going to find the difference. Okay? Now that word difference, in math, the word difference really means to subtract. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of what I mean for finding the difference. So if I see 2 integers adding together and they're different signs, what I'm going to ask myself is, who has the bigger group? Are the positives? Are there more of them? Or are there more negatives? How much bigger is the group? And that's really the question we're asking ourselves when we look at integers. So here, I've got positive 17 plus negative 21. I can see that my signs are different, right? I have different signs. So because I have different signs, I need to now ask myself, who is bringing the larger group to this battle? If I was going to line them all up and draw them out, who would have more, the negatives or the positives? Well, there would be 17 red guys and 21 blue guys. That means I'm bringing more blue guys to this integer battle, right? There are more negatives than there are positives, so that means I'm going to have negatives left over. But I have to figure out how many negatives I have left over. And so that's where the finding the difference part comes in. So I know I have more negatives. I have 21, and 21 is a bigger quantity than 17. What is 21 minus 17, right? If I have 21 blue guys and 17 red guys, the 17 red guys are going to take away 17 of the blue guys, and I'm going to be left with 4 blue guys in the end. Okay, so when we have different signs and we're adding integers, we're actually kind of subtracting. Okay, let's look at this next one. So I have negative 19 plus positive 12. These signs, again, are different. Who is bringing the larger group to our integer battle? I would have 19 negatives, and I would have 12 positives. I have a bigger amount of negatives than positives. There will be more negative blue guys in my little lineup going across than there will be positive guys. So I know my answer that's left over must be negative. I have more negatives than I have positives. Okay, so let's see. This would then be 19. I have 19 negative guys, and I'm going to take away 12 of them because my positive guys are going to cancel 12 of my 19 negatives. I'm going to be left with 7 of them in the end. Okay? Now, I'm going to, I need to just add one in here because I realize something that might become a misconception, so I'm just going to throw this in here now. What if I had we'll say negative 15 plus positive 23. Okay, so if I have here different signs, okay, that means I'm going to be finding the difference. Who is bringing the bigger army to our integer battle? There will now be more positives than there will be negatives because 23 is a bigger quantity than 15. So that means I'm going to have positives left over. And I'm going to say 23 of my positives, that's how many we brought, 15 of them are going to disappear because of those blue guys, and they're going to make a 0 pair. If I take away 15 red guys, I'm left with 8 in total. Okay? Now this works even if I have more than one integer. Okay, so same idea. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go step by step. Okay, so I'm just going to go from left to right. So I'm going to do positive 7 plus positive 9 first. Those signs are the same. That means they group together and they just make a bigger grouping of positives. Those guys walk up to one another, 7 positives, 9 positives, and they just make a bigger group of positives. So now I have positive 16 because 7 plus 9 is 16. Then we're going to add our negative 12 afterwards. And when I look at these two, positive 16 plus negative 12, oh, that is different signs. Okay, who's bringing the bigger group? There's going to be more positives. 16, there's more positives than there are negatives. 16 is a bigger quantity than 12. 12 subtracted from 16 gives us 4. That means there will be 4 positives left over. Once the 12 negatives cancel 12 of the positives, there would still be 4 extra positives left standing in the line. That is adding integers. Hopefully that comes as a review to you because it was something that should have been covered for you in grade 7.